morning, Central Baptist family. Once again, lockdown quiet time this morning from the book of 1 Peter. And I've invited my daughter Jamie. Jamie is second year university student. And Jay, why don't you read the passage for us, please?
Our passage this morning is from 1 Peter chapter 2 from verse 13. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme, or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing, when, mindful of God, one endures sorrows while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if when you sin and are beaten for it you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we may die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
Right, thank you, Jay. My thought in this passage this morning when I was reading in preparation for this quiet time is I would give it the title, Upside Down Godly Realities.
Why? What makes it an upside down godly reality?
Everything in this passage, or certainly most in this passage, points to behavior that would go contrary or upstream to what we see in our society. If you, for example, consider the fact that there is a call here that we be subject to the emperor. You know anything about this emperor?
No.
Emperor Nero, he was a tyrant. This man, you'll notice as we interpret this passage in the context, it's been addressed to people who are scattered. And they're scattered not because they're on holiday, they're scattered because they are being persecuted. They were being persecuted for their faith. They were literally running for their lives. And yet the Apostle Peter instructs these Christians to be submissive to the emperor. In fact, he goes on a little later in the passage, another upside down reality, a servant be subject to your masters. It goes against the grain of what we see in society. What do you see at university?
Yeah, if someone were to say this at university, I think people would start striking and throwing things around because it's not natural.
I think they'll start a Me Too movement.
Yes.
Because uppermost in most people's minds today, and I guess it has been down through the ages, is self-preservation, self-elevation, and promoting that which is beneficial to the individual. Whereas the Christian is called, and it is because God is a God of order. We ought to submit to the authorities. We ought to be submitting to this lockdown because it is an instruction given to us by the emperor, by the government, and so we submit. And even in the context of work, we submit to the employer. Not because of only good things, but this passage says even when things are difficult, even when things are unjust. And then, Jamie, what do you think? What do you think about the fact that Jesus is brought in as the example and the motive in this passage?
I think it's very important that Jesus is the example set for us because he's a good example to follow. In verse 21 it says, Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. So we are called to follow in his steps.
I remember some time ago, and I'm not sure that they're still around, but the WWJD bangles, what would Jesus do? Perhaps we would urge each other here today, and of course others who are listening, is that it shouldn't just be a bangle to wear, but in our daily lives to be asking not what is it that society at large is directing us to do and how to behave, but what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And Jesus suffered not as an end in itself. As we read on in this passage, we see that his suffering brought about salvation. It brings about our righteousness. It brings about our right standing with God. And so he suffers with purpose, so that we in fact can be united to God. And I love the way this passage ends. You were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls, as he nurtures us as his sheep. And so to encourage you here today, as God's people, we will face suffering. And Jamie, it's not going to be easy at university. History, I think you're going to hear lots of propaganda. English, I think you're going to hear all sorts of indoctrination, which will go in opposition, in exactly the opposite direction to what God reveals and directs. So for you as a younger person, as a student, perhaps for older people, other students, and even those at school, the way of God is different to the world. There is an upside down reality when it comes to holy living. And of course, we're even told that without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And so we ought to pursue holiness in the light of the righteousness and the gift that we have been given in salvation. So folk, have a wonderful Monday and week ahead, adjusting, I'm sure, to being at home all day, every day. And we're certainly enjoying it in our home, doing things together like this that we've never done before. So God bless you and go with you. Amen.